Hey guys, this is Miss Russum. I'm just going over Act 3 with you. Act 3 is an extremely important part of the play, and it's really where it starts to switch into that tragedy portion. Um, you didn't have any work due on Friday, so I hope you used that day to catch up. Act 3 doesn't have a PowerPoint. There's no like vocab section at the beginning, but it is long. There's 5 different scenes. Here's 30 questions. So you'll have today and tomorrow to do that. Real quick, your book talk is also due. If you've never done Flipgrid before, you just record yourself. So far I have none, which is good. Um, but you'll record your response, you'll hit this button and it'll pop up. And your book talk instructions, just in case you need them, are here for you, okay? Now, with Act 3, like I said before, Act 3 is really a turning point in the play. So far, we've had a lot of romance, a lot of like get to know each other kind of stuff. This is where things get dicey. We have the Capulets and we have the Montagues. Okay, Juliet, Capulet, Romeo, Montague. And as we know, these are feuding families, right? Nobody really knows what the feud is about. This goes back generations, okay? So this is like your grandfather picking a fight with somebody and you still being in a fight with that family. Okay, so Act 3, Scene 1. It's our first real tragedy, okay? It's very volatile. There's a real escalation of events. So you have Mercutio and Tybalt begin to fight, okay? Romeo is attempting to restore the peace, but throws himself between the combatants. So here, this would be Romeo. Maybe this is Tybalt, and this is Mercutio, okay? Tybalt stabs Mercutio under Romeo's arm, and as Mercutio falls, Tybalt and his men hurry away. So here you have the two feuding sides again. You have Tybalt with Juliet and the Capulets, and then you have Mercutio with Romeo and the Montagues. A very famous line from that, and I would say a quiz line for sure, is a plague on both of your houses. Why would he say a plague on both of your houses? It's because of the feud, okay? He's involved in this generational feud that really, honestly, has nothing to do with him except for he's Romeo's man, okay? He's Romeo's friend. And it causes him to die. Continuing with Scene 1, Romeo draws a sword, and then Tybalt and Romeo fight. Romeo ends up killing Tybalt. Now, this is going to change things for a lot of reasons, right? Romeo just killed a member of his own family because he's married to Juliet, even though nobody knows that. Benvolio urges Romeo to run, and then a group of citizens outraged at the reoccurring street fights is approaching. Romeo, shocked at what has happened, cries, "Oh, I'm Fortune's fool." So I'm Fate's fool. This is going to happen no matter what, which, you can agree or disagree with. Obviously, Romeo is making very rash decisions right now, so a lot of this is his fault. The prince chooses to exile Romeo instead of putting him to death. He said that Romeo is defending his man, which he kind of was. He's defending Mercutio, but he's still fighting, which the prince said would be a punishment worth of death. So he gives Romeo a little time and declares that if Romeo is found in the city, he's going to be killed. So this is going to create even more strife between our two lovers, right? The Montagues and the Capulets were fighting before, but now Romeo has to leave the city where Juliet is. Alright, so Act 3, Scene 2. Now we have the nurse and Juliet. Juliet is at the window, she's waiting for Romeo to come, she has no idea about the fight, she has no idea about Tybalt, and then the nurse rushes in with news of the fight. The nurse is kind of a comedy element. She's always kind of very dramatic. So she says things in a way that it sounds like Romeo has killed himself and killed Tybalt, and she's automatically jumps to that, oh, I'm gonna die too. And that's a peek into what's gonna happen. Okay, that's a peek into their rash decision making. Now, when the story is finally set straight, and there's a lot of dialogue that goes back and forth between them, Juliet understands that Romeo has killed Tybalt and has been sentenced to exile. She curses nature that it should put the spirit of a fiend in Romeo's sweet flesh. The nurse echoes Juliet and curses Romeo's name, but Juliet denounces her for criticizing her husband and adds that she regrets faulting him. Juliet has obviously lost the allegiance of her family. She's lost the loyalty to her family and is really in love with Romeo and is going to do whatever Romeo wants her to do. She laments now that she'll die without a wedding night, a maiden widow. The nurse assures her, however, that she knows where Romeo is hiding and will see to it that Romeo comes to her for their wedding night. Juliet gives the nurse a ring to give to Romeo as a token of her love. Now that'll come back up, so remember the ring, okay? Now, Act 3, Scene 3, and there's 5 scenes, so bear with me. Romeo goes and finds Friar Lawrence. Remember, Juliet's confidant is the nurse. Romeo really relies on Friar Lawrence. And Romeo's really dramatic here. He's like throwing himself on the floor. He's overcome with grief. And then Romeo claims that banishment is a penalty far worse than death, since he will have to live without Juliet. Now the nurse arrives, and Friar Lawrence tells Romeo, get up, be a man. The nurse arrives, and Romeo desperately asks her for news of Juliet. He assumes that Juliet now thinks of him as a murderer and threatens to stab himself. Okay, so this guy is super rash. He's like, oh, she thinks I'm a murderer, I'm gonna kill myself. It's really just shows his naivety, like how young he is. He doesn't even give the nurse time to explain, where he's like, oh, I'm going to make all these rash decisions. But Friar Lawrence kind of slaps some sense into him, okay? He scolds him for being unmanly, explains that Romeo has much to be grateful for. He and Juliet are both alive, and after matters have calmed down, Prince Aeschylus might change his mind. Stop acting so rash, kid. Things could happen, things could change. The friar sets forth a plan. Romeo will visit Juliet that night, but make sure to leave her chamber in Verona before the morning. So you can go see her on your wedding night, but make sure that you leave before morning. He'll reside in Mantua until news of their marriage can be spread. So he's gonna flee to Mantua. The nurse hands Romeo the ring from Juliet, and this physical symbol of their love revives his spirits. The nurse departs, and Romeo bids Friar Lawrence farewell. He must prepare to visit Juliet and then flee to Mantua. Alright, Scene 4. This one, this is our Capulet and Paris here. So Capulet and Paris walk together. Capulet says that because of their terrible recent events, he has had no time to ask his daughter about his feelings for Paris. Because remember, Paris is the guy who originally asked for Juliet's hand in marriage. Paris is about to leave when Capulet calls him back and makes what he calls a desperate tender of my child's love. Capulet says he thinks his daughter will listen to him, and then corrects himself and states that he is sure Juliet will abide by his decision. He promises Paris that the wedding will be held on Wednesday, then stops suddenly and asks what day it is. Paris responds that it is Monday. Capulet decides that Wednesday is too soon and that the wedding should instead be held on Thursday. This is our ticking clock, okay? Shakespeare puts this in really as a ticking time bomb. Now, not only is Romeo banished, where he could possibly have spent, a month or two in Mantua while they spread the news of the wedding. Now they have days, okay? Which is going to cause him to make even more rash decisions. So then we move on to Scene 5, and we're back with Juliet and Romeo. So just before dawn, Romeo prepares to lower himself from Juliet's window to begin his exile. They've spent the night together on their wedding night. Juliet tries to convince Romeo that the bird calls they hear are from the nightingale, a night bird, rather than from the lark, a morning bird. Romeo cannot entertain her claims. He must leave before the morning comes or be put to death. The nurse enters to warn Juliet that Lady Capulet is approaching. Romeo and Juliet tearfully part. It's a whole big scene. Romeo climbs out the window, standing in the orchard below her window. Romeo promises Juliet that they will see one another again. But Juliet responds that he appears pale, as in one dead at the bottom of the tomb. What vocab word is this? Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing. He appears dead as someone at the bottom of a tomb. Act 3, Scene 5 continued. Lady Capulet tells Juliet about Capulet's plan for her to marry Paris on Thursday. Juliet is appalled. She rejects the match, saying, "I will not marry yet, and when I do, I swear it shall be Romeo, whom you know I hate." Remember, they don't know anything about the marriage. They think Juliet is, their young daughter who hasn't been with anyone, but she's with Romeo now. She's married to Romeo, and they don't even know that. Capulet enters the chamber. When he learns of Juliet's determination to defy him, he becomes enraged and threatens to disown Juliet if she refuses to obey him. When Juliet entreats her mother to intercede, her mother denies her help. Capulet and Lady Capulet storm away. Juliet asks her nurse how she should escape her predicament. And this is the first time the nurse really kind of tries to sway Juliet in a separate way. She says Paris is really a better match. He's handsome. She says Romeo is as good as dead anyhow. Juliet pretends to agree and tells the nurse that she's going to make confession at Friar Lawrence's cell. But she's really changed her mind about the nurse. She knows she wants to be with Romeo, and who can help her? Friar Lawrence. So she's never again will trust the nurse's counsel. If the friar is unable to help her, Juliet commits to herself that she still has the power to take her own life. So we start to see the desperate actions that these two are willing to take to be together. This scene really changes it from a love story to a tragedy. We are on the trajectory of a tragedy now. We are on the trajectory of Romeo and Juliet ending that we know is going to happen because within the prologue they're going to take their own lives. How that will happen, we will see. We know now that Juliet is on her way to Friar Lawrence's cell to get some sort of plan to find Romeo by Thursday. If she doesn't do something by Thursday, she will be made to marry Paris. Alright guys, I hope that this helped. We will pick up here tomorrow. I am planning on streaming the Leonardo DiCaprio version tomorrow at 11:30 on Zoom. I know we were going to do it today, but I wanted to give you time to read Act 3 so that you had seen had read most of what we were about to watch. I hope I see all of you there tomorrow. I hope you're safe. I hope you're doing well. I miss you, and let me know if you have any questions.